this season of the Grift podcast is ending. I will be back in June with a whole new slate of incredible guests, brilliant founders, genius technologists, neuroscientists, and experts to help us all understand the forces that are shaping the future and how we can get ahead of it. I'm Misha da Vinci. This is the Grift Podcast, conversations to repattern your brain and get you ready for the future. In my last career, I was a human potential coach. Over nearly 2 decades, I worked with thousands of people from all walks of life, from Hollywood celebrities and power-playing executives to everyday moms and young people. Recently, I moved into the tech space because it became clear to me that humans would not be able to navigate the future effectively if we didn't understand and master digital technology, this new force that's entered the arena. In the past, realizing your potential was rooted in improving your relationship with yourself and with others. But today, tech has become interwoven with our human selves. And to succeed, we must all figure out our relationship with it. We can't just leave that up to Silicon Valley and the big tech companies. That is a prescription for disaster. So a primary goal of this podcast is to help you understand technology, how you can take charge of your relationship with it, and make it your servant, not your master. Over this first season of the Grift podcast, I talked with 18 of the smartest people. They were all mind-blowing conversations where I learned so much. In this final episode of the season, I'm going to tell you what most sticks out for me from each episode, and I'll share those powerful moments with you. Let's dive in and get ready for the future. In episode 1, I chatted with the incredible Nita Farahany. Nita's a professor of law and philosophy at Duke Law School and the author of The Battle for Your Brain, Defending the Right to Think Freely in the Age of Neurotechnology. This was the clip that stuck in my mind.
But the bigger mass market, I think, is the integration of that with becoming the new way we interact with the rest of our technology. People are really used to a keyboard and a mouse. They're used to the extent that they've used any spatial or immersive technology like a virtual reality headset, they might be used to like somewhat clunky hand controls or even hands being read to see how they move as if they interact. But they're not used to being able to just naturally interact with technology the way we would interact with the rest of the world or interact with another human. And what neural interface technology promises is replacing a keyboard or a mouse by picking up your intention to move and to swipe and to type without actually having to do any of those things, right? Think about like saying a word in your mind and then just translating that onto the computer screen.
We use keyboards or a voice assist interface with the computer or smartphone. And you're saying that we will now, the new interface is a neural interface where we think the thought and the computer responds, the smartphone responds.
Yeah, here's the crudest and easiest way to think about it. Apple ProVision is like a very crude brain-computer interface. It uses eye tracking technology, and it looks at what you focus on. So you're navigating through a screen and you see like on the screen in front of me right now, I see like a leave button and I see the timer going off. And so I just focus on that and I think that, and then it pushes, right?
I'm sorry,
that's up based on like picking up that intentionality of selecting through eye tracking. And it's creepy for a lot of people to think about, but it's in part because, think about it in the beginning as intentionally communicating that, right? Which is, I think that rather than I push a button or I have to navigate on a mouse to get up to a button to push the button. And if you think about even just the seconds to milliseconds that adds of friction to you doing everything, the idea of neural interface technology is to pick up your intention to type or to swipe or to move and to have that be the way you interface with technology.
In episode 2, my guest was Tracey, futurist and author of The Future of You. She was so smart and so fun to chat with. She blew my mind with this clip.
Always remember that the future is plural. Like there is no one future. The future is plural. There are alternatives to be suggested and investigated. There are always alternatives, and those futures are there for us to co-create. We are not in the business of forecasting, like predicting one future. The future is plural, and once you get, I had a company say to me the other day, I started off a presentation saying the future is plural, and they were just like, what? And the CEO came up to me, she said, when you said that at the beginning, suddenly all these things went off in my head, and I was thinking, oh yes. And actually it was liberating. It was liberating to them to think we don't have one dark dystopian automated future in front of us. It's open to us to co-create with others. And so I think always remember that the future is plural.
My next guest was Tom Kemp. Tom's a tech entrepreneur, investor, and policy advisor, and the author of Containing Big Tech: How to Protect Our Civil Rights, Economy, and Democracy. Here's my favorite clip from episode 3. You tell me, why write this book?
There needed to be a book in this area. Now, there had been books in the past, like 5-6 years ago. There was Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Roger McNamee wrote the book Zucked. Those are like 4 or 5 years ago. They don't take into account the rise of AI, the rise of TikTok, but also, even more significantly, the Dobbs decision, where things that were legal before that and rights that we had are now illegal in some states. And that means that there is now a greater opportunity to weaponize data against people. And a lot of the guardrails that some of the tech companies put in place after the 2016 election in terms of disinformation, et cetera, are now going away. And so I kind of looked at what's needed, and I think part of it is that there needs to be more education about the challenges associated with big tech, but also what to do. I just didn't want to be like a Debbie Downer and say, oh, the world sucks, these companies are blah 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 blah. Actually said, hey, here's some solutions that you can take as individuals, but also what we can do from a policy perspective. And I didn't want to provide an academic book, because most of the books have been very academic oriented. I wanted something, again, using that Uncle Larry analogy, something that you could hand a person that cares about different issues. Like they may care about climate change, or they do care about technology, but they don't really understand, like, what are the core business models, how is data being used. They may not understand exactly what AI is, which is much more than just Gen AI. And they also don't understand the fact that these companies have become large monopolies or duopolies, and they have such reach and they're in such control that it actually exacerbates the problems that we have with privacy and cybersecurity, because they're not being pushed from a competitive perspective to differentiate in those areas.
In episode 4, my guest was Paul Halpern. He's a theoretical physicist and prolific author. We talked about his life, work, and his latest book, The Allure of the Multiverse: Extra Dimensions, Other Worlds, and Parallel Universes. It was so cool to talk physics. Here's the clip that stuck with me.
So dark matter is a kind of invisible, unseen glue that holds galaxies together in and of themselves, but also combines them into clusters and so forth. So gravity explains why, for example, the Earth goes around the sun, the moon goes around Earth. But once you get up to the galactic scale, gravity in and of itself does not explain why galaxies are stable. In fact, if you took all the visible material in galaxies and mapped it out, it doesn't provide enough matter to hold galaxies together. So a lot of people think that there is invisible material in galaxies called dark matter that provides the missing glue to hold the galaxies together. I'm very excited about the rise of what's called, in our field, multi-messenger astronomy. Multi-messenger means getting information from a few different sources. And old-fashioned astronomy, the original old-fashioned astronomy in Galileo's day, relied upon visible light. And then later, that was switched to the whole electromagnetic spectrum, including picking up signals from radio waves X-rays, gamma rays, infrared rays. So the James Webb Space Telescope, for example, is picking up infrared radiation, but that's still all part of the electromagnetic spectrum, electricity and magnetism. But in recent years, scientists have been able to probe what are called gravitational waves, which are ripples in the fabric of space-time itself. And these are ways that space itself is causing waves, and we were able to detect these, and they provide a glimpse into the hidden universe, the dark universe, beyond sometimes the reach of light itself. And that's extraordinarily exciting because it means we can reach farther back in time than when we have visible light and look at things that happen in the dark, so to speak, things that we don't pick up visible signals from, or even any kind of light signal, but we pick up gravitational ripples from.
In episode 5, I chatted with the brilliant Amba Kak. Amba is a tech policy expert who's worked on 3 continents at the highest levels and who now heads up AI Now, a research institute that helps us think about and manage AI. Here's the clip that I still think about.
We're in that article specifically talking about this current trajectory of AI where scale has become a proxy for progress, right? So progress today is building towards larger and larger models running on these corporate data servers in pursuit of relatively narrow improvements against specific benchmarks. And so in this kind of paradigm, where scale is progress, what is actually powering all of this? The infrastructure in the most basic and traditional sense of the word are essentially these cloud and compute resources that are required to both train and then run these large-scale AI models. So that's a major part. But as we talk about in the article, the kind of dominance of big tech over the trajectory of the AI industry isn't, I think, compute is a huge part of that. I just saw this morning actually that the FT said that there was 27 or 28, there was 27 billion, let's say, I might have got the exact figure wrong, of funding that went to AI companies last year in 2023. And they said that 2/3 of it came from Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And so you ask yourself, what do Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have in common? Oh, they're actually the dominant cloud companies, right? And that's not a coincidence. It is because the way we're envisioning this technological paradigm at this point has everything to do with who already controls the infrastructural resources you need to in order to scale this technology. But what I was saying is, so cloud is a big piece of it. There's also labor and the skills and expertise of who can use this infrastructure most efficiently. We know that compute is a scarce resource, and so a lot of the emphasis, whether you're OpenAI or you're just some, your Mistral, they're all kind of really focused right now on trying to be as compute efficient as they can be, make the most bang for their buck. And that takes a very particular kind of engineering prowess. And that too, those brightest talents, where are they going? They're going to where not just they get the highest salaries, but where the hub and the most exciting and the largest scale AI research is happening. Where is that happening? That's happening in either in big tech firms or firms that are bankrolled by big tech firms like OpenAI. One of the things, the image that really sticks with me is that the OpenAI Microsoft whole Sam Altman debacle that happened over Thanksgiving, what it in many ways showed was that all roads in the end do lead to Microsoft for OpenAI. And I think similarly for a lot of so-called startups that are trying to enter into this generative AI, large language model ecosystem, they find that all roads must eventually lead to those that can give them the infrastructure for cheap or for free, and kind of provide them that stability of access.
For episode 6, renowned privacy expert Daniel Solove joined me. And here's the clip that still sticks out for me.
The traditional thing that I often see in these when I'm asked questions like give people a tip and just safeguard your social security number, or don't sign up for these websites, or don't have a social media account, or go and delete this or that. I don't think those are going to work, because ultimately, for the reasons I said, I think putting it just puts the onus on the consumer and makes them think, okay, if I just do this, that somehow I can protect myself. I think the main thing is to demand accountability. That we need to demand that there's greater accountability, and not settle for the existing laws and the existing solutions to say, these laws aren't enough, and these privacy rights that I'm being given to access my data and to delete data or correct data or opt out are just not good enough. And it doesn't mean that they're bad things, but they're just not enough. I asked for a meal and you gave me a crumb. You need to give me more, and there has to be a lot greater greater accountability by both by everyone, by the companies that are gathering and using people's data, as well as by the government and what they're doing.
So, how can people demand accountability? How would they go about doing this?
Well, I think it's to really push legislators to think about privacy differently. I mean, people are trying to voice that when when polls are taken. Um, uh, but it's also not to fall into some of these old arguments like I've got nothing to hide. It's really to demand that there be greater accountability, to say that these solutions are not effective, and they're not helping. I think part of it also is that some of the polls that we see are somewhat superficial. It'd be nice if the polls were to really suss out more than just a generalized concern over privacy, but would really kind of help show that people to start thinking about things that could help them here, so that it's a better picture can be painted about what people would want. Because I think when people are informed, I think what they want is they want to feel safe. They want to know that when they're surfing the internet, when they're sharing their data, they're not going to be harmed. Um, just don't harm me, don't hurt me. Do what's in my best interest with my information. Be trustworthy, and I think that's what people want.
Yeah.
That when I use a technology, I want to know that it's not going to hurt me.
Right.
I drive a car, I want to know it's not going to blow up on me. I fly a plane, I know that it's safe. And I think that's so I think it's the people. The best thing is to help kind of get the policymakers to know
Yeah.
that they need to do more. That they can't just stop at a law like California's, or pass the same old law again and again and again. That we really need to demand greater accountability from the companies, and that's really push the policymakers to do it.
Yeah.
And I think if the people do that, I think that could start to change things, and it can happen in one state. I mean, California's been the most influential. They initiated the law, and I think it's great that the states are passing the laws, even though I think that the laws are weak, and I wish they were different. I think it's at least a good thing that they're doing something, at least better than the federal government that's not. I think they need to change what they do, but it could be one state comes out with a law that comes out with an interesting innovation, and it doesn't have to be the whole thing and everything. It could just be one thing that advances the ball, and if that advances the ball and it's a good idea, hopefully other states will start to copy that. And that's what we see in privacy law. It's a lot of copycats.
Yeah.
I'll even settle for one good idea, like one good part of a law, that does something good. The more of those that spreads, to other laws, even if the whole law isn't good, there's sometimes some good parts or good pieces, and I'll take advancement wherever I can find it. even in little parts.
In episode 7, non-obvious thinker and author Rohit Bhargava was my guest. We covered so many aspects of what you need to know to get ready for the future. Here's my favorite clip.
Well, it's interesting because that's how the book started. It started as a exercise in wanting to share an optimistic vision for the future, to imagine what the future could be and almost create a work of science fiction in a sense, but the opposite of a dystopian science fiction, right? Not a utopia, because that
I
has
love it.
negative connotations too, of like, stuff
Yeah.
that we can't control. But that's how we started, but that's
Yeah.
not the book we wrote. Because as we started digging into the research and interviewing people, which we did for 3 years, we did 3 years of research as we put this book together. And so we started before the pandemic and went through the pandemic and then published the book sort of 2 years after the pandemic had sort of hit its peak, right? And people were back to doing things. And what we found in that time frame was that every thing we thought someone should be doing to improve the world, someone was already doing. There was already an innovator, there was already a company, there was already some sort of standard, there was something going on that demonstrated what the future could be because they had already imagined it and they were already doing it. The challenge was that they weren't getting as much visibility as they needed in order to truly succeed. So the book became a little bit of an exercise in advocacy for these amazing ideas. Because we thought if we could spotlight all these amazing people doing these wonderful things and put them under this umbrella of this positive future normal, maybe we could help them all to gain traction.
John Nosta was my guest in episode 8. He introduced the idea of the cognitive age and the interaction between humans and AI chatbots would positively change how we think and learn. Here's the top clip.
Now, here's the other thing. With Gutenberg and the printing press, that was a wonderful opportunity to democratize information, because now we can print and we can have people look and read and learn. And similarly with Google, that we had this opportunity to have access to information. But the access to information was very sort of one-dimensional, if you will. It's like, here is the information. But with large language models, we're not just accessing the information, we're accessing the cognitive dynamic that aligns with human thinking to activate our own thought. So that's that third step. It's not just handing us information. It's working with us in a cognitive capacity to help us think. And there's nothing more magical than that. So why I'm excited is because I can conjure my reality and I can explore it in ways that are profound and transcendent and ultimately lead to a path of spirituality. I'm not sure what the word is. A path of knowing, a path of empowerment. Our brains are fundamentally wired for a transcendent reality. I've always said that genius is our birthright and mediocrity is self-imposed. Our brains are optimized for heightened function. I believe our brain has almost an infinite capacity for cognitive function. And that aligns very magically with LLMs. It's a marriage of two cognitive domains that have been waiting for each other for thousands of years.
In episode 9, I chatted with journalist and author John Lawrence. We talked about smart cities and how they're silently changing the world we live in, for good and for bad. Here's the clip that sticks with me.
When I was researching the book, I kept finding out different types of technologies. The way I began to sort of classify them in my mind is whether they were oriented towards people or systems. And the ones that are oriented towards people are problematic, facial recognition, all the biometric stuff. With systems, it's a kind of a different story. The most positive application of smart city technology is smart grids and just changing the way the electricity system works. So, I mean, there are two parts of the electricity system. One is where you're getting that power from. Like, are you getting it from hydro and from wind, or are you getting it from burning coal? That's the upstream part. And then the second is, does your electricity system bring in forms of renewable energy, solar, wind, biomass, whatever, right? And if the answer to the second question is yes, then it's important because that is a much more distributed type of energy that requires these very complicated controlling systems that manage electricity flow. And that's smart grid technology. And if you accept the premise that we need to have an energy transition to more electricity, but more green electricity, then that's the precondition to having it done. If we want more wind, we want more solar, we want more energy storage. And California is great on this topic because there is really a lot of work being done on it, getting your cities off natural gas grids so they can get heat from heat pumps and so on. But on top of all of that, you need to have smart grids, which are not consumer choices. These are things that utilities have to deal with, and state or provincial regulators. But the investment in that is really important as a part of the energy transition. I tried to take a balanced approach in the book and say that there are things that are really problematic and there are things that are quite positive, and I would put that one in the latter category.
My guest in episode 10 was the incredible Dr. Jennifer Sciubba, political demographer and author of 8 Billion and Counting, How Sex, Death and Migration Shape Our World. We discussed so many important topics. This is the one I still think about.
You can prepare for what will the rest of your life look like. Are you investing in your health right now so that you can have that longer working life that you may be potentially forced into, depending on where you live? Are you thinking about your keeping your skills up? I wrote about this in a newsletter too, that a fascinating study out of the OECD that part of it was, what rules do employers have that maybe prevent people from working when they're older? But the other part was, what are older workers not doing that could keep them in the workforce? And even starting at my age, actually it was right around my age, it was a real unwillingness to upskill and reskill. It's kind of like, man, I feel like I just got out of college. I'm in my 40s. I don't really want to have to learn something else again. Like, shouldn't I be able to ride that a little longer? And the answer was no. So, I think about, how can I continue to maybe even invest more money in myself as a commodity there? And then, so that's really about the preparing part. And I think the action part, there's been some sprinkled in what I just said, but I think company level. And this actually brings me to, if anyone has some good stories on this, I am all ears because of my next research project. So I think it is at the company level that we're going to see our greatest innovations and preparedness for an aging society, how to be resilient. So, what are individual companies doing to think about, Walmart has been making headlines lately when they're kind of getting rid of college degree requirements to hire folks. That's actually an adaptation to population aging as well. In my world, in my parlance, it is. They may be thinking of it for a different reason, but it is an adaptation to aging. And so, I think looking at your own company and thinking about how you can tweak that is great. That's the place to be.
In episode 11, I chatted with technology pioneer, entrepreneur, and author Alvin Wang Graylin. We discussed the metaverse, AI, and virtual reality. Here's a clip worth revisiting.
I had my team do a study on this during the pandemic when people were locked in, and there was more kind of the deglobalization that was happening. What we found was that when you make people go into a VR experience and they travel to another country, they actually become 70% more interested to actually physically go to those places. And they were twice as more appreciative of this new culture. The problem, in particular in America, only 10% of Americans ever leave the country, or if you can't count Canada as a potential, other country is so much like America.
Yeah.
And so we did this study that actually got a bunch of people into VR and showed them virtual experiences in 3D videos and 360 videos of other countries. And what we found was that the people who went into these, they were 70% more likely to go to this other country than the ones that just watched it on video, watching it on a 2D screen.
Right.
And they were twice as interested in learning more about the culture of this other place than the people who only watched it on video. A lot of us consume our content on 2D video, and it doesn't bring you that closeness that you can get when you're immersed.
Immersive.
Right? So people talk about VR as the empathy machine, and there's definitely a lot of truth in that. And I think it's a great way also to create connections between people that they wouldn't have happened. And particularly now with AI and instant translation, we can actually break the language barrier that often happens. So if you can bring people to an immersive experience and have real-time conversations with people in a language that you can understand, then I think that those stats that I just gave would probably double.
In episode 12, my guest was Wendy Wong, professor of political science and author of We, the Data. Wendy's a political scientist focused on global governance and the governance of emerging technologies. We had a mind-blowing conversation about the secret world of data and how our behavior data is being harvested. Here's the clip I can't forget.
When data were not so common, and when data about people were not so common, I think people used to think we need more data. Especially, if you think about fields like computer science or data science, they need as much data as possible, to make their sort of products successful and to understand what they're doing and to fix any bugs. The problem is when you look at data about people. I think this is where the human rights come in, because I'm not concerned about astronomical data or data about tigers or something like that.
We like that.
We like that. We like more data, right?
More data.
But when it comes to humans, I think we crossed the line somewhere in, the 2000s, 2010s. I don't know when big data really became a thing, because I like to remind people that data don't exist in nature, that someone has to make those data, right? So in the past, we would just take our time reading a news article and it wouldn't be data. Now, websites track how quickly we can read through a news story, right? And that becomes part of, their business model. And I think that is really important. Shoshana Zuboff really got us down this line of thinking about behavioral surplus and how that was monetized. And I think part of the problem is we're still thinking that data are valuable in this economic way, but data about people, it should be thought of as not just economically beneficial and as you pointed out, monetization, using data, but people are not just financial beings. We're also social beings. We're political beings. We're cultural beings. And so if we don't think about the implications of creating data about human beings in this holistic way, that's when you get this distorted situation we have now. And this is why someone like me needs to say, hey, if you're collecting data about people, we should be thinking about human rights, because people are not just economic vehicles, where we have dignity.
Episode 13 was a recap episode. In Ep 14, I chatted with Hilke Schellman. Hilke is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter and assistant professor of journalism at New York University, and she's the author of the book, The Algorithm, How AI Decides Who Gets Hired, Monitored, Promoted, and Fired, and Why We Need to Fight Back. This was a really scary look at the rise of AI in the world of work. Here's my most unforgettable clip.
If you've ever sent an application via any of the job platforms like LinkedIn or Indeed or ZipRecruiter, all of them use some form of AI, but also a lot of companies use AI because companies keep complaining that they get millions of resumes. So for example, like Google gets like 3 million applications a year. IBM says they get about 5 million. So since the dawn of job platforms that we can sort of easily apply on LinkedIn or Indeed, on the other side, on the company side, they feel like, whoa, this is like overwhelming. We get so many applications per role and there is just not enough humans to go through them. So they look for like a technological solution. So we see, and the larger the company, usually the more technological solutions, right? Or the broader the application of technology. So we see almost all Fortune 500 companies use AI in their hiring funnel. So either like resume screening or even finding applicants. We see it in one-way video interviews where you get pre-recorded questions on your phone. There's no one on the other side, and you just sort of record yourself answering those questions. We see games in the hiring funnel. We see AI-based background screenings. So all along, we see it used in different ways. So it's pretty ubiquitous, like so much so that even a couple of years ago, the CEO of ZipRecruiter says, like, your chances that a human first sees your resume is like really slim. It's probably like 80, 90, 100% more like a machine is going to read your resume first. And we see that like all large companies have applicant tracking systems. They used to be like sort of glorified spreadsheets where you looked like, okay, Hilke has applied. Is she in the next round, or did we reject her? Did she do this interview? Did she do this assessment? But now most of those most of those tools also have AI built in some shape or form. There's a lot going on in the hiring world, and we see this also with monitoring at work. Like, we know the New York Times did this research and found that 8 out of the 10 largest companies in the US monitor their workers. And we also now that other companies like Starbucks and Delta Airlines and others use vendors that basically monitoring everything workers write on Slack and text and Zoom, and it is pretty ubiquitous. And I think because job seekers often get rejected, they don't necessarily know what has been happening to them, right? Because you just get a rejection like you did 20 years ago. In the firing process, we're starting to see signals. Like, we know that there was like productivity algorithms in warehouses. If you drop below a certain amount of times, you might get reprimanded and then fired. We see this with like a lot of drivers. They have like monitoring through GPS and other ways. So we see that those signals are being taken into account for firing decisions.
My guest in episode 15 was musician, meditation teacher, and global brand ambassador for Reddit, Will Cady. We talked about life, creativity, technology, and his book, Which Way is North? A Creative Compass for Makers, Marketers, and Mystics. My favorite clip was Will doing a guided meditation. So metal. Here it is. You teach meditation, among other things. Can you walk us through a little meditation that will sort of help us find that in-between space, maybe, or some, I don't know, a couple minutes?
Certainly. I can do a short one. So wherever you are, preferably not driving an automobile or operating any sort of heavy machinery, get comfortable. I prefer to sit and strengthen my back, just kind of put my hands on my knees and pull my chest forward and push my shoulders back, just kind of bow the spine out and stretch a little bit, and then go side to side. Just whatever kind of stretches get you into a comfortable place.
Mm-hmm.
And now just close your eyes and just breathe for a few moments. And as you do, notice how you breathe. Notice where in your body you're actually breathing. Is it in your belly, your chest, your shoulders, your throat? Like, where do you send that breath? And then notice generally how your body feels, where there's tension, where there's calm, where you might feel some soreness. A lot of that is information. I can presently feel my flight from New York with all that turbulence in my body right now. As an example, there's a story in that tension. You carry it. Just notice it. Now, under the umbrella of this idea of creativity, that's already something. You're already carrying ideas in your body. So if you can deconstruct that into a story, after the meditation, you could write or paint or sing, express the story that your body's been holding. Release it. But now let's play with breath a little bit. So every inhale is going to be in through your nose. Every exhale is going to be out through your mouth. So let's take your deepest inhale of the day in 3, 2, 1. Breathe in through your nose. Expand your belly. So breathe into your belly. Relax your diaphragm. Expand your sides, your ribs, your chest, your shoulders, all the way to the top, and hold. Just feel how good that feels. Feel how your heartbeat is changing as you hold your breath. And now breathe out through your mouth. Keep your back straight. Pull your belly into your spine. Get a real dignified kind of yogi sort of pose here, and hold when you get to the bottom of empty lungs. Feel the discomfort of that. Another breath in through your nose. An even deeper breath, slowly, belly, sides, chest, shoulders. The height of your inhale is the height of your gratitude. The more you can appreciate having air, the more you can appreciate anything. And now breathe out through your mouth, pulling your belly into your spine, getting to that place of discomfort and holding. The depth of your exhale is the depth of your courage. The more courageously you can face not having air, the more courageously you can face anything. Breathe in again through your nose, and now see if you can a meter rising from the bottom to the top, representing the full capacity of your lungs. When that meter gets to the top, hold. Notice how your body feels. And breathe out through your mouth. That meter falls from the top to the bottom. And hold. And now come back to breathing on your own. Take a little inhale and breathe in whatever way feels comfortable for you. But notice a couple things. First, notice where you breathe on that meter, because we generally don't use the full capacity of our lungs. And so that means that your range of breath is probably closer to the top or closer to the bottom. And what does that mean? If you breathe, if you draw your breath closer to the height of gratitude or closer to the depth of courage. And consider how you breathe affects how you feel, and how you feel affects how you think, and how you think affects how you act, and how you act affects how you breathe. This meditation is a way to intervene with that story that you've been carrying. Notice what's shifted in your body from the first time you closed your eyes and kind of felt into it. You have the opportunity here to ask yourself, what is that story that is unfolding in your breath? You also have the opportunity to implant a new story, a new rhythm, a new pattern, a new way of being. You can do it anytime, 3 breaths. That's all it takes. And that's the meditation.
Beautiful. Ep 16 was a solo ep with me. In Ep 17, cognitive neuroscientist Chantel Prat was a most delightful guest. We talked about our brains and how to treat them better, and we discussed her incredible book, The Neuroscience of You. Here's one of my favorite clips.
These digital spaces are increasingly tailored to what attracts our brains, because our attention systems are marketable, right? You know, one of the things that scares me the most is that our smart devices are curating a world that they think our brains want to see, and that this brings us more and more and more apart. Our shared ground is less and less and less. And we become more and more and more entrenched and convinced that our truth is the truth. We have easy access to other people who think like we do, which reinforces this thing. And so our brains are more and more and more prepared. You were talking about entrenchment, and you don't notice when things are actually different and you're moving around in the world out there. And that's what scares me, is because I think as human beings, we need to understand that every single one of us is limited and finite, and we only have a part of the story. And we need to be able to relate with other people who have different points of view and understand where those points of view come from. Like, we evolved to solve problems in groups and to see the world in different ways and say, like, this is my family, this is a group. I don't, agree with my brother or whatever, but it's really interesting that he pointed out the squirrel here when we were looking for this, and to be able to relate to one another. I think we need to understand that our version of the truth has been curated.
Yes.
And our brains are a target. That's the thing that I think, you were saying, do people understand their brains enough? No, like the average person doesn't understand their brain enough, but somebody who's targeting a misinformation campaign, they understand your brain, and they understand what catches, and they understand what are the ingredients of something that will not only make an impression on you, but that you will want to then share and propagate through your other network of like-minded people. I think that, you know, it's like you need the user manual. You know, when I wrote the book, I was like, I want to give everyone the user manual to
Love it.
themselves.
Yes.
So that they can at least have as much knowledge as I do.
In episode 18, I chatted with the brilliant educator and entrepreneur, edupreneur, Anna Lorena Fabrica. Here's the clip I can't forget.
I actually think that kids and entrepreneurs have a lot of things in common, right? Especially kids before they enter sort of this system and before we start to impart all of our ideals and what society expects from them and how to do things. But before that, they, something they have in common is that they'll look at something that the rest of the world, adults, etc., will look as mundane and as something regular, and they will see it as new and fresh and ripe with opportunity, and they're like excited to jump in. They're like kind of looking at things from different angles, right? And I feel like we kind of suck that out of them when we train them to, oh no, this is the path. These are the things you need to learn. These are the things you're going to need for a future where 2/3 of the kids that are going through grade school right now are going to have jobs that haven't been invented. However, here's what you need to learn, and this is what you're going to be. And so we kind of remove that element that they naturally have. And so I'm so curious of how can we not only as adults go back to that and sort of like tap into our inner kid, but how can we preserve that in the younger generation? And that's one of those things that really drives my work.
And finally, in episode 19, my guest was Professor Brett Frischman. This was a mind-blowing conversation about techno-social engineering and the re-engineering of humanity. Here's one of my top clips.
People often say, well, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? And I think that usually the answer is yes, both in different ways. I mean, and so the political climate in the United States is something that scares the hell out of me, and how it sort of is affecting the rest of the world and back and forth, the dynamic effects. That stuff is worrisome.
But what excites you? There's a lot of stuff that's challenging across the board, but what's exciting?
It's the funny thing is this is like the flip side, the same coin, right? So a lot of the things that are scary and troubling, like we've built systems that allow us to have immediate, near costless access to millions and millions of strangers, and we yay that we democratize speech and access to knowledge. And that's something I'm optimistic. That's a great thing in a sense. But on the other hand, it hasn't necessarily led to a smarter and more capable population. And so in some ways, it's maybe very positive that we've built this world. In other ways, it's very scary that we've built this world because it's not inevitable that democratization of all these things leads to the benefits that people imagine. At the same time, that's what you can kind of be excited about. I mean, we've built incredibly powerful systems. What excites me is when we have good human social interactions, good things happen. I think despite all the negativity about the state of the U.S. and our politics and stuff, there are lots of really good people throughout the country who mean well on both sides, and on however many sides you want to pick and look for. There's great people involved. It's when you actually get to real people and understand people, you see that there's lots of good in humanity. And so as much as I might worry about the path we're on in certain ways, we're not all the way at the end of the path that I worry about. We're sort of still living in a pretty good world.
That's all for today, folks. And for season 1 of the Grift Podcast, I'll be back in June with an incredible lineup. We spent most of the season looking at the problems. Next season, we'll be focusing on the solutions, the technologies that are being built to solve those problems. And a lot more neuroscience, because the secret to improving ourselves is understanding our brains and how to rewire them. I can't wait to rejoin you in June. Please leave a comment, let me know your thoughts, who you'd like me to have on, and anything else that's on your mind. Ciao for now. I will see you all in June. Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe for new episodes wherever you get your podcasts and on our YouTube channel.